course.
Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Susan Boss, and I'm a corporate client manager for Intergate Immigration Services. We are a private immigration company. We have 2 offices, one here in Johannesburg, and our head office is actually in Cape Town. We've been in business since 2005, and we've been basically helping foreigners come to South Africa, whether it be for work, study, family, since then, and trying to make the process for foreigners as smooth as possible.
How many work permits do we have here in South Africa?
You have your general work permit, an intercompany transfer permit, a quota work permit, the exceptional skills permit, and a corporate worker certificate. There's also such thing as a work exchange, but this isn't necessarily a work permit as it doesn't exist under a work category, but it is a way for young professionals to be able to be paid in exchange for work.
Can you give us the characteristics of each work permit and how it does work?
Like a quota work permit is based on basically the Department of Home Affairs comes out with a list of professions that they feel are scarce skills in South Africa. And basically, if you hold one of those professions, if you're then able to fulfill the requirements, then you would qualify for a quota work permit. For an intercompany transfer permit, that's usually for companies who wish to second employees from affiliated companies abroad. So say they have a branch or a subsidiary abroad and they want to bring people in for a project for a certain period of time. Again, if they fulfill the categories, the main one being that they're being seconded, then they would qualify for that permit. A general work permit is exactly what it is. It's general. It's the most common work permit, and most times, most people qualify for that permit if they don't qualify for anything else. The biggest requirement of that is that they must have a job offer in place in order to be able to qualify for the general work permit. And exceptional skills is based on either skill or qualification. There's nothing in the Immigration Act that says what is exceptional and what is not. So it's actually up to the applicant to not only fulfill the requirements, which are extensive, but also to prove to the Department of Home Affairs that they have a skill that is arguably exceptional. With a corporate worker certificate, this is dependent on the employer having a corporate permit. So it's actually, you're not able to apply for it unless the employer has a corporate permit. And then the work exchange, again, as I said, it's actually geared towards young professionals, people under 25, and it's a way for them to come and basically, it is what it says it is, it's work exchange. So you're being paid to work for a short period of time, and it's specifically geared for young professionals who are looking to build those skills.
So basically, a general work permit is linked to a company.
That's correct.
So in that permit, they will specifically say that the applicant or the candidate is working for this company.
That is correct. Most times actually with many of the permits, the company will be listed on the permit.
But for the quota work permit, you say it depends on the list of the government has.
That's true, and you're basically applying under that category. So for example, if you are in IT and you are a network and support professional, and you fulfilled the requirements, you could get a quota work permit. But what's great about the quota work permit is that you actually don't have to have a job offer in place in order to qualify for it. But the Department of Home Affairs requires that within 90 days, you must go back to the Department of Home Affairs with a job offer and say, now I have a job. So sometimes they will then go back and actually write in the company that you now work for. Sometimes they don't. I mean, it just depends. But generally they don't. They want to know where the foreigners are and what they're doing. And if a foreigner decides to switch jobs, you have to reapply for the entire permit again. You can't just go to the Department of Home Affairs, unless it's a quota work permit, you can't just go to the Department of Home Affairs and say, I switched jobs, thanks. You have to actually reapply and show again why you are the right candidate for that job with that new company, because they will then link that new company to your new permit.
Okay, so for the quota work permit, do you have like a list of those professions that can go and
usually what I do and what we do generally is if someone is interested in a quota work permit, I'll usually ask for their CV. I will actually go through and assess if they meet the requirements, if they are in a category that is represented on the list, if they fulfill the requirements required of the permit. If they are, then I will go back to them and say, you would qualify, is this something that you would be willing to do? Do you think that you could meet these requirements? Yes or no, and then we move forward from there.
Can you tell me maybe 2 or 3 categories of those who can apply for the quota work permit?
It ranges. You have, under the sciences, you have astronomers, there's math teachers, science teachers, engineers is a big one, you have boiler makers, welders, IT professionals, as I said, network and support. I mean, it ranges. It's very jewelry makers. So it's very expansive.
And for the corporate permit, you say the employer must have the corporate permit first before they can...
That's correct, yes. Basically, a corporate permit is for a company who knows that they're going to be bringing in a large workforce from abroad. It allows them basically to go to the Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Labor and say, look, we have tried to find South Africans who can do this kind of work, and we can't find them. So we want to bring in, let's just say hypothetically, 200 people from so-and-so country, and we need 50 of this category, 50 of this category, 50 of this category, and 50 of this category. We then motivate that to the Department of Trade and Industry, to the Department of Labor, and to the Department of Home Affairs. They then come back and say, you're right, we see that you've tried and unsuccessfully been able to find anyone, therefore you can have 50 of this, 50 of this, 50 of this, and 50 of this. Then when they want someone, that's when you apply for the corporate worker certificate. You apply under one of those categories, and the application is quite minimal.
How many people you can bring if they want to apply for the corporate permit as an employer?
There's not a limit, and there's also not a minimum. It's basically, it's whatever you can, you need to be able to prove why it is you need that many. So as long as you can show the proof of why it is that you need and motivate for why it is that you need that many, it's up to the departments to decide. But if you motivate for it, then...
Which work permit is the easiest or the fastest way to get for a foreign national?
Well, I never say anything is easy because I think easy is subjective. But I would say, if I had to choose, I would say either a corporate worker certificate. As I said, because the corporate permit application is quite extensive, the corporate worker certificate is quite small. But as I said, that's dependent on the employer having a corporate permit. The other one that I would say would be an intercompany transfer permit, but that's only if the employer has the structure in place to be able to do the transfer.
So those are the 2 permits that are quite...
I would say, if I had to choose on the scale of easy to difficult, they tend to be on the easier side, yeah.
Which work permit is the most difficult to get?
Again, I mean, difficult is subjective. It really kind of depends on how much effort you're willing to put in. But I would say that the general work permit can be viewed as difficult because it's quite time sensitive. There's a lot of time sensitive requirements that have to be done, and if you don't do them to a T, then the application tends to become quite complex and can become quite stressful for the applicant. But if you do it right, and it becomes very straightforward, and then any other time that you have to do it again, you're probably like, got it, you know. The other one is the exceptional skills permit. Again, because you have to motivate to the Department of Home Affairs why it is that your skill or your qualification is exceptional. And because it's based on an opinion rather than a set of requirements, it's harder and more difficult, I guess, to motivate for that. And on the requirements side, the requirements for that permit are also quite extensive.
Okay, talking about exceptional skills, do you think French speakers can apply for exceptional skills permits just because of the language?
The thing is, as I said, the exceptional skills permit is based on skills and qualification, but basing it purely on the language alone, I I'm not sure that that's good enough to motivate the Department of Home Affairs that that's exceptional, especially because there are actually quite a number of French-speaking people already here in South Africa. You know, you have to motivate to the Department of Home Affairs that this is something that will benefit South Africa, that this is something that South Africa, it will be an advantage to them to have you here in the country. So unless it were something like you've studied French, you've literally gone all the way up to a PhD level in French, and you are renowned in the field of French language, and you meet the extensive requirements, do I think that you could actually pull that through successfully? I would say based on language alone, it would be difficult. But you have, like an example, like if you had a writer, and his writing was only in French, and like he had publications in French and things like that. So I wouldn't necessarily base it solely on language. That I would say, that would be difficult. But perhaps if he had another profession and the French language was a part of it, then that could be something different.
For example, medical profession, but additionally adds the language. Do you think it can work?
I don't think the language has an effect on that. I think coming to South Africa as a nurse, again, I wouldn't be sure that that application would go through, just because there are actually quite a number of nurses here in the country. You would have to prove that you have some sort of skill in nursing that no one else has, or that very few people have, or that you have literally gone up so far on the qualification scale that you have a double PhD plus a master's in a specific kind of nursing that you can't really find here. And you also always have to think about, what benefit am I bringing to South Africa? Would they see me being here as an advantage? You know, so those are the kinds of questions that we often ask people who are trying to apply for that. You know, they have to think to themselves, would the Department of Home Affairs view your profession as a benefit to this country? Would they see you as an advantage?
How long does it normally take to get a work permit?
There's kind of two parts to the process. There's the compilation, there's preparing the application, and then there's the processing time. Generally, again, it depends on the work permit, because obviously, as I said, some work permits have more requirements than others, and some of them are time sensitive. Generally, given our experience, it takes about 1 to 6 weeks to compile an application. Processing times, if you've submitted the application abroad, it usually is taking 30 days or less at most embassies, consulates, high commissions abroad. It's not always the case, but given our experience, here in South Africa, it's taking about 6 to 8 weeks to process a work permit here. So you always kind of have to put those two times together.
Why is a foreign national asked to go back to his country of origin to apply for a work permit for the first time?
If someone's lived here for a long time and there's no restrictions on their permit, that's not to say that they can't apply here. We have done that before. But usually, if it's possible, we recommend that foreigners apply for their very first permit in their home country or a country of temporary residency because of the faster processing times. Most people can't wait that long to start working. You know, 6 to 8 weeks, that's a long time, and employers don't want to have to wait. So if the opportunity exists for them to go home and to be able to apply for that first permit abroad, it's a faster processing time. You're looking at 30 days or less at most embassies, whereas, you know, as I said, given our experience, it's about 6 to 8 weeks. So that's why we usually recommend people go home if they can. And obviously it depends on the conditions on the person's permit. Sometimes there are conditions that say that they can't change their status here in South Africa, or employment is prohibited, or you know, there are a bunch of things that it could be, in which case then it would be required of them to go back. But in general, we always recommend, if there is the opportunity for them to go home and apply for that first permit at their home, that they should do it. They should take advantage of it, really.
Okay, and the second permit will be easier to get it from here.
Well, the thing is that most embassies abroad won't actually allow you to apply for your second permit abroad. Because they say if you're already a temporary resident, then you should apply for the permit in South Africa. Unless you cancel that permit and then you go back basically with nothing, then you could then apply again. But
Okay, foreign candidate has a problem when they look for a job, the employer says, we want someone who already has a work permit.
Yeah.
And then you can't get the general work permit because you don't have a contract. Yeah. So for someone who has a study permit and who has the opportunity to find a job and it comes to you, what would you advise him to do?
I get this question a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not surprising that that's one of your questions. Basically, any employer or company that says, well, you need to have a work permit first, doesn't understand the process. Because specifically, we'll use the general work permit as an example, you have to have a job offer first. So it's oftentimes to the applicant's benefit to have an understanding of the process, to talk to someone like me or someone else at another company and understand the process, so that when you come in for those interviews and the person says, well, we need you to have a work permit first, you can actually say to them, well, actually, the process is that you actually have to give me a job offer first, and then I can go and do this, this, and this. Here is the process. And also, if you already know what work permit category you will be applying under, there's a chance for you to prepare parts of the application yourself, which is to the advantage of the employer, like getting the foreign qualifications assessed at the South African Qualifications Authority. If you have that certificate, that already puts you, that already takes 10 to 30 days off of your application time. So, it pays for the applicant to know what the process is and what permit they would qualify for. Because I think it looks good to employers to be able to give them information and to kind of set them straight on what the process is. As I said, most companies don't actually understand the process. They don't actually know that you actually, in most cases, have to have a job offer first. They don't understand that if the person actually already has a work permit, that work permit is most likely linked to another company and they're going to have to reapply anyway.
We ask questions and they say it's easiest for that candidate to change the name of the company instead of
you
going
can't
from
just,
the start.
But unless you're on a quota work permit, you can't just change the name of the company. You can't go to the Department of Home Affairs and give them a new employment contract and say, okay, I'm changing jobs, thanks. You have to reapply for the whole thing. You have to show your SACWA certificate if you already have it, or apply for it if you don't. You have to do, the company has to place a job advert to show that they couldn't find another suitable candidate. You have to do a salary benchmarking certificate to prove that the person's not being paid too much or too little by South African standards. These are things that all have to be done, even if you're changing an employer. Unless you're on a quota work permit, that is different.
Yes, but with the interview, I have the feeling that then the quota work permit is the way to go.
Hey, and we think the same thing. If you qualify for a quota work permit, do it.
It's
quite underused. We actually had training yesterday, and we were saying that not a lot of people apply for it, which is really a shame because
they don't know about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't know about it.
Yeah.
Because if you say I'm an engineer, for example, so do I need to register with
the ECSA? Mm-hmm. Yes. You have to register with the professional body here in South Africa. You need to prove that you have at least 5 years of experience under a specific category. And there are certain engineers that they're looking for. You need to have reference letters from previous employers and obviously be able to show your CV. So
if you have less than 5 years,
then you wouldn't be able to do it. Exactly.
The quota work permit.
Yeah. But it definitely is an option that is underused. And I would definitely have people, who have at least 5 years of experience, at least, send the CV. You never know. A lot of people, they don't know what they qualify for, and I often send it back and say, well, you actually qualify for this, and they're like, really? Yeah, really.
What would you advise a foreign national who has a study permit and who has an opportunity for a job? Which kind of work permit can you apply for?
If someone's on a study permit, it obviously means they are studying in South Africa or that they've studied. If the person's highest degree is here in South Africa, then they don't have to get their foreign qualifications assessed. If they have a South African qualification, then they don't need to have foreign qualifications assessed.
So those who need a foreign qualification assessed are those who didn't have
schooling in South Africa.
Oh, okay. Which work permits leads easily to the permanent residence?
Well, there's a number of ways of getting permanent residency, but in terms of work, if you've had 5 years of continuous employment, then you qualify for PR. and that's not including time on an intercompany transfer. So it's all the other permits, 5 years, continuous employment, and proof that you're still employed. With an exceptional skills permit, what's actually great about that is that you can actually apply for PR at the same time that you're applying for temporary residency. You automatically qualify for PR as an exceptional skills candidate.
Can refugees or asylum seekers apply for the work permit?
Well, technically, under the refugee and asylum status, they actually shouldn't have to. They actually, most times, have the authority to work. They actually just look at their paperwork. Most times they don't realize that. So have you looked on that second page where it says, they're like, oh, so actually most refugees and asylum seekers have the right to work. But I think there was a 2011 decision in the courts which basically said that if for some reason they didn't have the right to work and they had good motivation, that they would be able to apply for a work permit if need be. But as I said, in most times they shouldn't have to because they are given the right to work.
And if they have to apply for the work permit, is it a long process?
It's the same that everybody else has to do.
And if someone has a permit expired,
yeah,
that's a general work permit, let's say, and then after 2 years, no more work, he was fired or the company closed down.
Okay.
So he found himself without any work, and the permit expires. He spends, let's say, 1 year without a new permit.
Okay.
So if that person finds another job,
right, they would first have, basically, if they allow their permit to expire and they stay within the country, they are technically illegal.
Yes.
So the Department of Home Affairs won't allow them to submit any new applications as someone who's illegal in the country. They would have to legalize themselves first, which basically usually means that they have to pay a fine. And then only then, once they get, basically when they pay the fine, the Department of Home Affairs then gives them another permit, usually like a visitor's or something like that, to allow them to stay legally, and then only then can they then hand in the permit.
And is it a long process for the legalization?
The circumstances, depending on the situation, change, but as far as I know, it usually revolves around just the matter of paying a fine. So oftentimes we have people who are illegal who we help, and basically what we do is we compile the application and get it ready for submission, and then we literally go to the Department of Home Affairs. The person then pays the fine, and literally right after they pay the fine they become legal again, we submit the application. And then once you have an application submitted at the Department of Home Affairs, you are legally allowed to stay in the country during the duration of basically waiting for the processing time.
Can someone travel with the receipts that they receive from Home Affairs?
Yes, basically saying that they have an application pending at the Department of Home Affairs, yes. Oftentimes what we do is we draft a letter, basically just reiterating that the person has an application pending at the Department of Home Affairs. Just reminding the person who's stamping them that no, they are legal in the country, they're waiting for the outcome.
But would you suggest someone to just go by himself to Home Affairs or to use an immigration agency?
I think it depends on what you want. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're wanting someone, if you're really not wanting the hassle of having to compile the application and run around and submit and all that stuff, and you're willing to pay for that service, then by all means. You know what I mean? Because that's the point of our service. We take the hassle away as much as possible from the applicant. We fulfill the requirements set out by the Immigration Act. We try to compile as much of the application as we can. We submit on the person's behalf if they're submitting in South Africa. We're able to follow up. We're able to go and pick up the permit once it's been issued. If that's the kind of service that you're looking for, then by all means, you should come to someone like that. Sometimes people can afford the service. Sometimes people would just rather do it themselves. But I mean, we have a very good success rate, I would say.
Thank you very much, Susan, for answering all our questions.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. I hope I was able to give your readers information.
Yeah, I'm sure they have everything they wanted to know.
Good. I'm glad. Well, obviously, if they have any other questions, they're always able to contact